Mark Mellman is president and CEO of Democratic Majority for Israel, joining us from Washington. Mark, thanks very much for being with us. You've heard, obviously, what Trump has said before. You just heard the president on his way to Kentucky sort of doubling down and saying a different version of some of the same statements. What's your reaction?
Well, look, the Congress of the United States passed a resolution, Democrats and Republicans, very specifically saying that accusations of dual loyalty are anti-Semitism. Ilhan Omar made those accusations. That's why the resolution was passed. Now President Trump is employing exactly the same kind of language that Ilhan Omar was employing. It was anti-Semitic when she said it, and it's anti-Semitic when he says it. And he needs to apologize, and he just needs to stop, to leave the American Jewish community alone. The reality is the Democratic Party is very strongly pro-Israel. We just saw this in a vote the other day. All but 15 or 16 Democrats voted to condemn boycott, sanctions, divestment movement. We have Democrats that are passing that foreign aid. The president is totally misrepresenting the policies of the Democratic Party. But the really important thing is he's trafficking in anti-Semitic rhetoric, and that cannot stand.
Well, I would say an apology is unlikely, Mark, but what do you think the impact, the actual impact of President Trump's statements will be?
Well, look, there's two kinds of impacts. First of all, there's the impact on the Jewish community. The Jewish community, I think it's fair to say, is outraged by these statements, and properly so. Calling into question the loyalty of the American Jewish community, it's anti-Semitism, and it's beyond the pale. There's a political impact. The reality is Donald Trump wasn't going to get many Jewish votes anyway. He's likely to get a few fewer than he would otherwise. And then there's the impact on the broader society. And look, the reason that we are so sensitive to this anti-Semitic rhetoric is that anti-Semitic rhetoric can lead to anti-Semitic violence, just as white supremacist rhetoric can lead to white supremacist violence. We've seen that violence in the American Jewish community. It's very new to us, but we're seeing it, and anything that might contribute to it is really horrific as far as we're concerned.
Mark, as you mentioned yourself, the claims of dual loyalty have been used both by Ilhan Omar on the progressive Democratic side and by the president again today. How concerned are you that Jews themselves, that the American Jewish community is becoming a sort of political football between Democrats and Republicans, and might actually affect also the sort of bipartisan nature that Israel has enjoyed in the past?
Well, there's no question that President Trump and the Republicans are trying to turn Israel into a political football. Unfortunately, the Prime Minister cooperates fully, Prime Minister of Israel cooperates fully with this effort. A serious error, a serious mistake on his part. He is putting, they are putting bipartisan support in jeopardy. But keep that in perspective. The reality is, it is not, today we still have bipartisan support for Israel. You have 3, 4, 5, 6 Democrats who are not pro-Israel. They have different points of view. That's fine. The overwhelming majority of Democrats, the overwhelming majority of elected Democrats are strongly pro-Israel. And this kind of rhetoric and these kinds of actions by the Prime Minister, the President, threaten that in the future.
Well, what do you want to see Prime Minister Netanyahu respond now?
Well, he's got to respond for himself. But the reality is he was quick to condemn anti-Semitism from the far left. He ought to condemn it from President Trump as well.
All right, Mark Mellman in Washington. Pleasure to have you with us.
But the truth is, the reality is Prime Minister
Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just saying the Prime Minister enjoys good relations, apparently, with lots of anti-Semites in Europe as well as in the United States.
All right, yeah, pointing to some controversial relationships that Netanyahu has visited with in Hungary and the like. Mark Mellman in Washington, thanks very much for that. This really is a complicated story that touches both Tahrir and Israel.